does it apply for all of us? So the context is here that we are in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and in the Srimad Bhagavatam, we are more or less coming to the middle of the Bhagavatam. In the Bhagavatam, how many cantos are there? 12 cantos. How many chapters? Yeah, 335 chapters. Now, out of which we are right now in the 5th canto. Now, the Bhagavatam deals, it talks about the nature of the world through contrasts. And not just contrasts, but often through extreme contrasts. Extreme contrasts is that if we, sometimes you can, the essence of the Bhagavatam has some mystical stories, some paranormal kind of powers, many different kind of things are there in the Bhagavatam. But the essential message of the Bhagavatam is about choices. What are the choices that we are going to make when we face life, and especially life's challenges, and even more specifically, with choices when we face life's unfairness. And Parikshit Maharaj, who is the student hearing the Bhagavatam, has faced what will probably be one of the worst unfairness that somebody can face in life. He's been a great king, very virtuous. He's protected Dharma, he's fought against Kali itself. And yet, for a small mistake, he's been cursed to die in 7 days. And at that time, Shukdev Goswami could have told him many stories. So the purpose is to help him remember Krishna. But it's not, these stories are not just told in a vacuum. Any story that comes to his mind, he tells. He especially selects stories that will help Parikshit Maharaj deal with the unfairness that has been done to him. And that's why, see, generally, whenever we want to, even we hear some stories, we need to be able to see something similar in those characters. If somebody watches a movie, somebody reads a book. So the idea is we should be able to identify with the characters in some way. Then we can connect with it. So in general, the Bhagavatam is about kings. And kings who have faced unfairness in a way similar to what Parikshit has faced. So we see in the 4th canto we have Dhruva. Parikshit feels unfair. He says, this something similar happened to a 5-year-old child. You were at least an adult. But that child took shelter of Vishnu. Now in the 5th canto, now he's going to tell the story of Bharat. Now it's almost the opposite spectrums. It's like if you consider a life story, Dhruva is at the start of his life. Now Bharat, in one sense, is more similar to where Parikshit is. Now there is no description in the Bhagavatam that Parikshit was planning to renounce the world. He was in the prime of his youth, the peak of his power, and he's ruling virtuously. But then he was cursed. Now Bharat had renounced the world, and then a small mistake. What happened? He saved a deer. And while he was saving a deer, see, the way temptation comes in life is also very, very, you could say, strategic. If somebody has never drunk alcohol in their life, and somebody comes and tells them, let's drink alcohol, that person is not going to be tempted. Isn't it? So if somebody, say for example, his name is Sattva Guna, then a temptation in tamas is not going to attract that person. So what happens for Bharat? The temptation comes is he is naturally a protector. That's what he has been. And when he sees a deer passing by, it's an infant deer. It has lost its mother. It's my duty to protect. He protects. So what is that saying? No good deed goes unpunished. That's the nature of the world sometimes. He does a good deed. His mistake is being a protector is a one-time event. But from the protector, he becomes a maintainer. And from that being a maintainer, he gets attached. So Bharat's story is like that. Now in the next canto, we will have Chitraketu's story, where he is a king and he is also in a stage where he has actually become elevated, gone to higher planets, sees Lord Shiva, and then a catastrophe happens. So the idea is the Bhagavatam is telling different stories which are relatable for Parikshit. And now at this particular point, Bharat's post-enlightenment state is being described. That what happens, he goes to, rounds another king, he becomes a deer, and then he acts like a dumb and deaf person till he meets this king. And then he sees this king is in a similar situation to how most kings are. Bharat was a king, Bharat was never as attached as Rahugada was. But he's speaking in very sharp, incisive tones. Now, Bharat has had first-hand experience of the nature of the world. And now he's telling him, don't become trapped. He's trying to explain to him the nature of the world. So that is the context of the story. That the character, sometimes we may miss out the bigger picture, we see each verse, we see the purport, and it's important to look at that. But what is happening here? What is the bigger picture? And Bharat is speaking from his realizations, and he uses this metaphor of the forest of material existence. And he's saying how a person gets trapped. So this is the context. Now let's look at the implication. One of the biggest problems for any theistic person, any person who believes in God, is to reconcile the nature of the world with the nature of God. That now, what is the problem? That the nature of the world and nature of God. Now, all theistic traditions assert that God is good, but this world, there's a lot that is not good in this world. And how do we see this world and reconcile it with the nature of God? A good God and this world, how does it gel together? That's the question. So in this particular place, the metaphor of the forest is used. So that's the topic we'll try to discuss today. God's nature and the world's nature. Now there are many problems associated with how to reconcile them. One of the biggest problems is the problem of evil. Evil is, why do bad things happen to good people? Now, evil traditionally has two categories in it. There is natural evil and there is moral evil. Natural evil is where bad things happen, and moral evil is where people do bad things. So, if the world is good, why does the world feature terrible things like earthquakes and tsunamis and such terrible stuff? And if the world is created by God, why do such things happen in the world? And if the living beings are made by God, then why do the living beings do terrible things? Why are people so cruel? Why are people sometimes so brutal and atrocious? So this is one aspect of the problem of evil. But once we get into a little more philosophy, this is a obvious problem that comes for any thoughtful person. That that why is there so much suffering in the world? Now there are different metaphors which we use to understand the nature of the world. And I will talk about a few metaphors today to try to understand the nature of the world. So the common metaphor is that it's a prison. Hmm. That one way of understanding it is that we all have done wrong, and that's why we are in the prison, and we are suffering because the world is a prison. Now, the nature of the world is that no metaphor uh, neatly explains the nature of the world. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu gives the example that when we look at the moon may be high up, and there are two branches. A child can't see the moon, child is just looking all around. Mother wants to show the moon to the child. Mother says, okay, can you see this branch? Can you see this branch of a tree? Can you see the shiny object in between? That's the moon. Hmm? Oh, the child says, okay, I'll climb over to the tree and catch the moon. No, the moon is not there. So the idea is that metaphors and analogies can point. So I'll give various metaphors and I will point out the problem with each metaphor. And then we will try to see how all the metaphors together can help us understand the nature of it. So let's look at the metaphor of a prison. Now, why am I talking about this? Forest is one metaphor. Now we look at like that different metaphors. Now we look at the positive of each metaphor and the negative. The positive is that at one level, it explains the presence of suffering. That a prison is obviously not a five-star hotel. So we understand why there'll be suffering. Then it's also, it I bring the idea of wrongdoing. That we have done that we have done something wrong, and that's why we are in the prison. Now, the problem with this metaphor is twofold. First is that what is our wrongdoing? That is not told to us. Any country in which a person is put in jail without telling them what wrong they did, oh, that would be considered to be like a dictatorship, a brutal place. And normally, not only should be the person told what their crime is, the person should be allowed to give a chance to defend themselves. But we are offered none of this. And if that were not a bad enough problem, a far worse problem is that a prison is never a place of temptation. This is a prison, we are told that, say, our own mundane desires got us into this world, our own sense gratificatory desires got us into this world. This is a place where we are actively tempted to do the very thing that got us into the prison. So that means that it's if this no prison is meant tempted to do wrong. So this would make God into not just a cruel person but a sadistic person. That he has put us in a prison without explaining what we did wrong, and he is made the prison in such a way that we are tempted to do the very things which will keep us in the prison. So the Prabhupada talks in the purport about sex pleasure. It's extremely tempting pleasure, and it is very, very difficult to resist. So, generally speaking, any prison is meant to deter people from wrongdoing. The whole purpose of a prison is to give no facility for doing wrong and to encourage and inspire people to do the right. If somebody is an alcoholic and they're put in jail because of criminal behavior because of alcoholism, they won't be presented with alcohol bottles in the prison. So, this metaphor of a prison, it falls short. Now, the other metaphor is that it's a university. This is a common metaphor, especially in New Age spirituality, where the idea is, oh, that we are meant to learn and grow and graduate. So now the positive of this metaphor is that here there is an emphasis on learning. that okay, if it's prison, it's all just enduring. You did some wrong and you suffer. But here it's about learning. You learn and you grow. And then when you learn, the idea of a prison is, sorry, the idea of a university is that you learn and there's a direction, there's a trajectory. There is eventually growing and then we graduating. So once we learn the lessons that are supposed to be taught in the university, we can graduate out. Now, this idea is, for example, when we talk about we go back home, back to Godhead. And then we graduate from this world. So now the problem with the metaphor of the university is that there is no clear teacher or teaching or syllabus. We don't know who is the teacher. Now we may say, okay, the spiritual master is the teacher. But most people don't find a spiritual master. What is the lesson to be taught? There is no clear, you could put it more precisely as instead of teacher, there is no clear educational structure in the world. Normally, something at the university, when you go into the university itself, you're told, okay, you are in this grade right now, you are in this year in the university, now you study these subjects and you'll grow from here to there to there. So the idea is that if we consider this to be a university, then there should be some clear syllabus and there should be some clear criteria. Okay, you do this, you pass. If you don't do this, you fail. So what is being taught, how we are being assessed, none of this seems to be clear. Now, I'm talking about this from more from a newcomer's perspective. That a newcomer means a person who's just in the material world, is struggling for life in the material world. And again, it does not explain the misery of the world. That a university is not meant to be a place of misery. Yes, we can say that there are studies and studies can be difficult, but university is not meant to be a random place of great misery. So the university metaphor, it works in some ways, but it does not work in some ways. Now, if you move forward, so the prison metaphor is there, the university metaphor is. Now, if you see, the difference in this is the focus is on what we get out of the university. What we get out of the university. What do we are we just enduring our time over here, or are we meant to learn and grow? So you could say the university metaphor is much more affirmative and positive. Now, beyond that, now another metaphor is that it's just like a sleep. It's like a sleep and a dream. You could say this is where the idea of the unreality is there. It's like we often have the metaphor that sleeping, wake up, jiva jago, jiva jago. So we are sleeping and dreaming in this world. And now the problem, so I'm going to talk about four metaphors using the acronym PUSH. The prison, university, sleep. That's what we are discussing now. Now the positivity of this is that there is a sense that this is not real. That there is a better reality out there. And we wake up and this is just a dream. You wake up and your real life will be there. But the negative of this is that it trivializes the immensity of suffering. That it's for us, we are going lifetime after lifetime. It's like there is no clear process by which you wake up from a dream. Rather, we go from one nightmare to another nightmare to another night. And each lifetime starts like a dream, like a wonderful dream, and the dream turns into a nightmare. It's like somebody tells us, come on, let's watch a movie. And we say, somebody comes and says, watch a movie. This is an excellent movie. This is a rom-com. It's an enjoyable romantic comedy movie. And we start watching it, and it turns out to be a ghastly horror movie. And not only the ghastly horror movie, we find that we are not just a spectator in the movie, we are the victim in the movie. So it seems terribly deceptive. So the immensity of the suffering is okay if it's just a dream. Now, it really doesn't convey the idea, the gravity of the suffering. So now, the point of the sleep movie is that it also underscores the idea of illusion in this world. That there is illusion in this world. And then we have to get out of illusion. The negative is that, again, that how to wake up. That is not very clear. How to deal with illusion, how to wake up. That for most people who are asleep, there has to be somebody else who will come and wake them up. So it's like we are living in a world where everybody is dreaming, everybody is having dreams and nightmares, and it's like we are sharing some dreams, we are having separate dreams, but there's practically no one who has woken up, and who's going to wake us up? We just continue in our dreams and nightmares. The last metaphor is the metaphor of an hospital. Now, this is where the idea is we are deceased. We are deceased, not deceased. So we are deceased over here. Now the specific metaphor comes out in many places where it says that the holy name is like the medicine, Krishna Katha is the medicine, that we are having Bhava Roga. Bhava Roga is the disease of material existence, and Krishna Katha is the Bhava Aushadhi, the medicine that will cure the disease of material existence. So now the positive of this is that it casts God in a more compassionate role. Like God is like the doctor, and God is on our side wanting to treat us. Now we could say that is slightly there in the university metaphor also, where God is the teacher. And it portrays us, we are more of victims than criminals. Generally, if somebody is sick, we don't consider that person to be a criminal. We consider that person to be a victim. And the idea is we help that person. So the metaphor is much more positive. Now the negative of this metaphor is that actually the disease is deceptive. We don't feel the disease. In fact, how is it that the very thing that is the cause of the disease, that seems to promise relief from the disease? So if material enjoyment is the cause of our disease, then material enjoyment itself seems to promise relief from the disease. So it's like somebody is an alcoholic and they feel great pain, and alcohol acts as a pain medication also. So then it's very, very difficult to even recognize that you're deceased. And the disease is deceptive also because exactly what is the cause and what is the cure. Neither of these are always very clear. What exactly caused the disease? How exactly will I be cured? Because if we say disease is suffering of the world, then the sufferings of the world hit everyone. People who are pious, people who are impious, people who are devoted, people who are non-devoted. So everybody gets old, everybody gets disease, everybody dies. There are places where those who are devoted, that means that somebody is taking a treatment, they're diligently trying to be cured. Sometimes people who are the most devoted suffer the most. There are phases in the history of the world where people suffered because of their faith. So, for example, devotees in Soviet Russia, they're persecuted because they were devotees. Across religious traditions, there are people who have been persecuted for their faith. So, it does not seem as if that the cure is actually providing relief, at least at a visible level. Now, at an experiential level, that is different. But the point is that the nature of the world is very, very difficult to figure out. And no metaphor conveys and the reality and the gravity of the world's nature in a one neat or comprehensive way. Now, each metaphor is meant to convey different points. So the idea for us is that I'll move towards the conclusion in the chit, the takeaway for us now. I took out the implication. So here the metaphor was a forest. I took another metaphor. I took a series of metaphors. The takeaway over here is that for us, yena kena prakarena mana Krishna niveshe. Somehow or the other, fix the mind of Krishna. That the idea is this world is a dangerous place, and it's very difficult to come out of the illusion, the entrapment, and the suffering of this world. So whatever metaphor helps, yena kina prakarena means somehow or the other. What does somehow or the other means? That whatever works, we need to use that to inspire ourselves to focus on Krishna. So for us, anukulyasya sankalpa, pratikulyasya vati. Accept what is favorable, avoid what is unfavorable. So there will be times for us when we go through certain situations and no metaphor will seem to make sense. Or rather, if we go on a, let's put another, not no metaphor makes sense. And if we stick to one metaphor, life will just not make sense. So, what do we do at such times? It is that we have to find out some way to make sense of life in such a way that we can keep moving toward Krishna. Some way we make sense of life so that we can keep moving towards Krishna. I'll give two examples of this principle. When Krishna says in 10.10, Dadami buddhi yogam tam yenamam upayanti, that I will give you the buddhi by which you can come to. So that now what is the point over there? That for all of us, when events happen in life, we need to be able to make sense of those events in a way that we feel inspired in our Krishna consciousness and not discouraged in our Krishna consciousness. That is Buddhi Yoga. Now, Buddhi Yoga has two distinct meanings based on the words. The Buddhi to do yoga. That means we get the intelligence to do yoga, to connect with Krishna. That is one meaning of Buddhi Yoga. The second is yoga that gives buddhi. That we practice the yoga and that gives buddhi. So we could say these two meanings are the buddhi to do yoga. This is more like a bottom up approach. We use our intelligence to try to find out a reason why we should keep practicing, why we should take shelter of Krishna. Yes, sometimes in the world there are no good options. That even practicing bhakti seems to be a path of frustration and misery and difficulty and austerity. Then we need to convince ourselves this may not be a pleasant option, but this is the best among bad options. Like Prabhupada would say, make the best of a bad bargain. And sometimes yoga that gives buddhi, this is like a top-down approach, where we get inspiration, where we suddenly, yes, this is what I want to do. This is what I am going to do. So, what does this mean? Sometimes we may hear a class, or sometimes suddenly we wake up and we feel very energized and inspired in our bhakti. We come and take darshan and we feel very attracted. So, there are times when the top down approach is more the approach of grace, of kripa. So, like in Damodar Leela, Yashoda Mai had to tie Krishna. There are two fingers. Two fingers. One was her own endeavor, the other was Krishna's mercy. So sometimes we might get mercy, only everything makes sense, everything falls in place. Or even if things don't make sense, it just doesn't matter. For us, Krishna becomes such an important reality that it doesn't matter whether things make sense or not. The experience of God becomes more important than the explanation from God. Now, why is this happening in my life? What is going on over here? So at this particular point, sometimes we may get explanation, but sometimes that experience we get, that experience itself is so enriching that the experience becomes more important than the explanation. But this kind of experience will not come regularly to us. It is not a push button on demand kind of experience. It's not that every day we come for Mangalarti and we get, okay, I'll get a divine experience. It doesn't work like that. So at such times, for those times when that experience is not coming, we need to have explanation. And what explanation will work for whom? That varies from person to person. Not just from person to person, it varies for the same individual from situation to situation. Mhm. So, which explanation will work when for us? When we are ourselves suffering, we may say, okay, I accept that I've done some bad karma in the past and this world is like a prison and I'm exhausting my own karma. But if I have a small newborn baby and that baby is suffering, thinking of that baby as a person who has done some terrible karma in the past, it's just it's just very difficult at a human level to process anything like that. At such times, we may just have to think that, okay, this is a hospital metaphor. This is a place where their pain is inevitable, but I am a part of the care team. If you're in a hospital, we don't focus so much on why the person has got the disease. We try to understand, but the point is this person has disease. Let's provide them some relief. Right? Let's help them to be healed. So we have to be in that sense uh, cognitively flexible. We have to be intellectually robust to find out which explanation works for us when. I'll conclude with what Jiva Goswami says in the Sandarbhas. He says broadly that there are two things which can keep us connected with Krishna. He doesn't use the word Krishna conscious, that is the word Prabhupada coined. But we could use that word. So there are two main things. One is buddhi and the other is preeti. Preeti is love for Krishna. So once we have got preeti, once we have got attraction, affection, love for Krishna, then we don't need buddhi so much. We can still use buddhi to share Krishna bhakti with others, but we don't need it. But till we have come to the state of preeti, till we have got that love for Krishna, which leads to a immensely enriching experience of Krishna, till that time we need to use our buddhi. Now, I just gave four metaphors. It's not that this is the exhaustive list of metaphors. There are many other metaphors, like the forest metaphor is one metaphor. The point is that we have to be intellectually robust and flexible to see how I can make sense of what is going on in my life. And that way we can face life sufferings and keep moving toward Krishna through those sufferings. I'll summarize what I discussed. Our topic today was the nature of the world and the nature of God, how to reconcile them. I use the acronym CHIT. C was the context. I spoke here about how here in the fifth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the story of Bharat Maharaj that has parallels with Parikshit Maharaj, uh, in the sense that Bharat would actually renounce the world. So this, before this, in the fourth canto, there's the story of Dhruva. In the next canto, there'll be the story of uh, Chitraketu. So the idea is that the Bhagavatam is focusing on how do we make sense of life's unfairness, and how do we keep ourselves spiritually motivated even amidst life's unfairness. Mm. We want to still be devotionally motivated, devotionally dedicated. So Parikshit Maharaj is being told you are not alone in facing life sufferings. So now we discuss the implication that the suffering of this world, how is this reconciled with the nature of God? I talked about four metaphors: P, U, S, and H. P was what? Prison. Now, each metaphor, we discuss the positive and the negative of each metaphor. The second was university. The prison metaphor, the positive is that okay, in prison you will be suffering. The negative is that prison is not a place of temptation, and we are not given an opportunity to know why we are suffering. S was what? Yes, sleep or dream. That the university metaphor gives us a more positive idea that we are here to learn and grow. But then what exactly is the educational structure? That is not very clear. Sleep dream, it conveys the idea there's an illusion and there is a better world out there, better reality out there. But exactly how do we get out of the sleeping stage, and how immense are the suffering, the nightmare, all that gets trivialized. And the hospital metaphor is where that we are sick, we are more victims than criminals, and God is on our side, helping us to be cured. So there are different metaphors, and the takeaway for us is that we need to find out what works for us. Whatever works, we need to use that. We need to be intellectually flexible and robust and dynamic to see what works for us. Ultimately, to move towards Krishna, we need buddhi yoga. Buddhi yoga, dadami buddhi yogam tam. Buddhi yoga is both ways, the yoga that gives buddhi and the buddhi to do yoga. So the yoga that gives buddhi is by the practice of bhakti, we will get preeti. We'll be attracted towards Krishna and will naturally come towards Krishna. But we also need buddhi by which we'll do yoga. That is basically the buddhi, the intelligence that we have. So this is more of a top-down approach, more of a bottom-up approach. And somehow or the other, we want to make sense of our life and stay connected with Krishna till we can come out of the illusion of this world. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. Is there any question? Yes. Yeah, good. Yeah, how much should we endeavor? If you look at Srila Prabhupada's life, Prabhupada at the age of 70 left India to come to go to America. He endeavored a lot. As Prabhupada is to Prabhu, he says that he asked Prabhupada, what is the secret of your success? And I haven't seen it written anywhere, but Prabhupada, he said that Prabhupada told him hard work. Prabhupada really worked very hard, barely slept much, and at age of 70, 75, he would have more energy than his disciples who were probably one third of his age. So Prabhupada was working extremely hard, there's no doubt about that. So I think that is it that our endeavoring uh, does not leave room for Krishna? I think it's more in the matter of the mental space rather than the physical endeavor. That in the physical endeavor, we need to do everything we can. So if you see the pastime in the Mahabharata, where Arjuna decides to kill Jayadratha by sunset, now Arjuna endeavors to his fullest capacity. And despite his endeavoring to the fullest capacity, when he's not able to reach, then Krishna intervenes and Krishna enables him to reach Jayadratha. So now when we say that we that 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 we should see leave some room for Krishna. Now that can mean two different things. One is that we cannot predict or control everything, and Krishna often does his magic. One of my friends, he went to my spiritual master and he came with a very good plan for how he wanted to do Western outreach. And my spiritual master told him, he said that something like this, basically, I'm paraphrasing. He said, I am confident that your plans will fail and you will succeed. So reality practically very rarely works according to our plan. Prabhupada didn't plan that he would actually reach the counterculture in the West. He probably, as far as we have the historical evidence, he had not studied anything about American culture. He didn't even know what the counterculture was. But that's what he found interesting, and people who were interested, he took that. So in that sense, that our plans, it's important that we plan, but our plans should not make us so attached to those plans that we don't see how Krishna is working. Many times it happens that we try to do something and we try our best, but it doesn't work. And then that makes us so frustrated that we don't see that, okay, this is the door I want to go through, and I'm banging my head and body against the door, but it's not open. But then some other door is opened. So our planning should be our endeavoring and planning and doing our planning should be to show Krishna that I am serious about serving you. But it shouldn't show Krishna aside. We're not pushing Krishna aside. It shouldn't blind us to how Krishna is acting and Krishna is. If that happens, then it's a problem. And another problem that comes up is when we endeavor too much. How do we know we are endeavoring too much? That means that we start mentally uh, thinking of ourselves as a controller. And now, of course, we have to control for the sake of serving Krishna to some extent. But what happens is that we start becoming not just blind to Krishna, but averse to Krishna. We not say that I'm averse to Krishna, but we become bitter and resentful about whatever obstacles are coming in our life. Even when Prabhupada was alone and he was on the streets of America, he'd spent a whole lifetime trying to serve and he had not got any results. But people who met him found that he was just very cheerful. He was happy. It was not that he was dissatisfied, this is not happening, this is not happening, that is not happening. Not dissatisfied in the sense of he's being bitter. So I think those two things, and when we endeavor, I think we need to endeavor to the 100% of our capacity, definitely. But the purpose is to show Krishna that we are serious about serving him. Hmm? But at the same time, the negativity shouldn't blind us to Krishna's plan, blind to Krishna's reciprocation. That how Krishna reciprocates may be very different from how we want him to reciprocate. Hmm? And we shouldn't become averse to Krishna or bitter about the world. Like this is what I have seen across the world. There are many devotees who are very, very sincere and very zealous, very vigorous in wanting to serve Krishna. But they have some vision and they initially start talking about the vision and then immediately start talking about all the ways in which other devotees are obstructing them in manifesting their vision. They start becoming bitter about the local management, bitter about this person, that person, that person. It's understandable that if you want to serve, do something for Krishna and somebody else is not helping or actively obstructing and sabotaging, we will feel bad. But if that starts dominating our consciousness, then what is happening? In trying to offer the world to Krishna, we are making our heart unofferable to Krishna. But that should not happen. Does that make sense? Yes. You want one question? Yes.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. There's a question online. The question online is, thank you for your wonderful class. How should one look at calamity where many lives are lost in an instant, e.g. plane crash, simultaneous karmic reaction?
Okay, so when some calamities come, how do we see those calamities where lots of lives are lost at one go, like the plane crash in India? I'm not sure there's one answer. See, it's like if we are in the world, we interact with the world through our Gyanendriyas and through our Karmendriyas. The Gyanendriyas is how we perceive the world. Karmendriyas is what we do with the world or what we do in the world. So, in general, the Vedic texts are more about what we do. It's not so much about making sense of the world as making sense in the world. Making sense of the world means what is happening over here. Making sense in the world is what I am doing sensible. The two are very different things. So, making sense of the world. In general, if we look at any incidents of calamity, uh, at that particular time, there is no specific emphasis of karma talked about. So, for example, Arjuna has to fight against the Kauravas. Krishna, as omniscient God, is there with him. Krishna does not go into any past life regression to tell him, oh, Bhishma was so and so, and you were so and so, and Duryodhana was so and so, and he did this, and you did this, and because of this, now you have to fight against. Even when, for example, Draupadi is dishonored, there's no again telling, Draupadi, you had done so and so because of this happened to you this life. So, in general, when specific incidents of suffering are coming, there is no reference to karma while addressing those specific incidents of suffering. In the fourth canto, we have the story of Prithu, and his citizens are suffering from a famine. And at that time, Prithu does not tell them it's your own collective karma you are suffering from. He makes arrangements. Because I am the king, this is my responsibility, this is how I'll try to fix it. So the point I'm making is when there is suffering, our focus should be on seeing how we can help, if we can help. Our focus should not be trying to explain, because sometimes what happens when we try to explain, it does seem to be like we are trying to explain away the suffering, the reality and the gravity of the suffering. So, from a so that's why I'm talking about two different things over here. There's a philosophical truth and there is a psychological truth. By psychological truth means that our philosophy should not make us insensitive. Our philosophy should not make us uncompassionate. Our philosophy should not make us heartless. And so, yes, in principle, when anybody goes through any kind of suffering, it is a result of one's past karma. That's the broad principle. But Krishna also says, Gahana karmano gati. How what karma comes when, we can't be precisely sure. So we need to see that always we approach situations with a service attitude and focus on how we can be of service in that situation. And if explaining the principle of karma is of service, then we can speak that principle. But what should not be that should not be the only arrow in our quiver, and we should not use it to just explain away the suffering and become heartless. So that's the broad answer. Yeah.
That specifically when devotees suffer within the society, for example, there's abuse or they feel like they've been misunderstood by senior, mistreated like that, that seems to be when it's even harder to accept because they've come to Krishna and now it feels like within Krishna's society, I'm being abused or mistreated. How does one reconcile that?
It's very difficult. See, generally, whenever any suffering comes, any event happens, we could place it in many different levels of causation. So, for example, if I have cough right now, I could say, okay, why is it? Because I'm not wearing warm enough clothes. Why is it? Because last night I don't know. Last night maybe it was too cold. It could be because I spoke too much in last few days. It could be because the weather here is not very good, or it could be that I have got some health problem because of which is that. Now, could any of these be true? Possible. Could all of these be true? They're all possible. But the point is, when we are looking at a problem, we need to focus on the most actionable way to deal with the problem. The problem is here now. And problems can have causes at multiple levels. And say, for example, if we start feeling very cold right now, and somebody says, oh, the cold is because of global warming or global climate change. Now, okay, but what are you going to do about the cold right now? Oh, it's climate change. We should become environmental activists. Yeah, but right now we are having a class. What can you do about it? So in general, we need to look at problems at the most actionable level. So at the most actionable level, we understand that sometimes people with malicious intent also come into the moment, or sometimes people when they get power, they also become corrupted by the power. So the safeguard that we are trying to put in place is that nobody should have absolute power, and also that as devotees we shouldn't be naive that whatever is happening is just accepted passively. We need to also be capable of careful and sometimes critical thinking also. So I think we as devotees have found an actionable way to deal with it. That doesn't mean there is a complete guarantee against prevention of this. But now, if you want to make philosophical sense of it, it is that there's nowhere in the material world where we will not feel the brunt of the material world. As you rightly said, in devotee circles, we may feel it even worse. And that is true, that is painfully true. But the fact is, yes, we are practicing bhakti, but we are practicing bhakti in the material world still. And the influence of the material world will still come in. So, generally, religious organizations explain this kind of thing as the result of bad apples. Like one bad apple does not spoil the entire bunch of fruits. And that is generally true. But then, if there are lots of bad apples, then we might have to think, is there something wrong with the way the apples are being made, the way the apples are being preserved? That's why sometimes it's an individual who is problematic and that individual has to be weeded out, removed. And sometimes it's the system that is breeding such individuals or is attracting such individuals. And then there has to be more of a systemic change. And that's why dharma has both these meanings in the Bhagavad Gita. Dharma refers to individual duty to do the right thing. That's what Arjuna is asking. But dharma is also collectively resetting society. When Krishna says dharma samsthapanarthaya sambhavami yuge yuge, I come to establish dharma in the world. That is more of a collective reset of society, a collective reform or a collective revolution. Krishna comes to bring about a change in who is in charge of the society. So basically, dharma has both these meanings. That if I am here, I belong to a collective. So that is the individual to collective. That is dharma. And that is what Krishna is asked by Arjuna at 2.7. But there is the duty of the collective to the individual also. And that is 4.8. So, Pruchhami Tvam Dharma Sammudha Cheta and Dharma Samsthapanarthaya Sambhavami Yuge. So that dharma se glani, the decline in dharma, can happen in both ways. Where one individual is not doing the dharma, that is dharma se, that can lead to dharma se glani. Like say, there's one corrupt cop somewhere, and that's why crime is going on. That's an individual not doing the dharma. But if there is a whole system of the cops is corrupt, then that is a bigger problem. But that's also a problem. Sometimes things have to be addressed at a systemic level. So generally, religious organizations tend to pin the blame on the individual, and that's convenient. And because why? Generally, religious organizations are conservative. The idea is that we have something coming from the past and we're implementing that. That's why collective change, generally, they're very slow in doing that, and that's okay. But there are times when systemic change is also required. So there's a quote of Prabhupada where he says that if somebody leaves Krishna consciousness, Tamal Krishna Maharaj said this, I, I have not seen him, I have not seen a written form, but 3-4 places I found it. He said that if somebody leaves Krishna consciousness, it is 50% their responsibility and 50% our responsibility. Generally speaking, most people say, oh, if somebody devotee leaves, he's in Maya, she's in Maya. And we will blame that person. But if many devotees are leaving, then we need to also do some soul searching. Is there something wrong because of which so many devotees are leaving? I think at least in some areas, especially with respect to abuse, soul searching has happened. I won't say complete changes have happened, but lots of systemic changes have happened. In other areas also things will gradually happen. I think we'll stop here. Already 9 o'clock. Thank you very much. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Nitai Gaur Premanand.
Hare Krishna. So,
I have written a couple of books. The other book is also there, the prayers one.
yes, Prabhupada.
So, in case any of you would like to have, This is Bhagavad Gita for the CEO. There is 10 principles from the Bhagavad Gita which I explained. In practical way, using some simple conceptographic diagrams and other things which I was doing. So it's a conversation, how the Gita can help us to manage our emotions better, how it can help us to become more sensitive in our speech. I have a chapter on karma also, how especially from a leader's perspective, in a leadership role, how karma needs to be seen and how it should not be seen. That's one chapter, and how to bounce back from failures when be resilient. That's explained in this book, published by HarperCollins, a national bestseller in India. And this is prayers inspired by the Bhagavad Gita. There are 122 prayers. Each chapter, each key verse has a prayer, a beautiful picture of a deity of Krishna, and there are prayers for various occasions. Prayers when we are feeling lonely or lost, prayers when we are directionless in life, prayers when we are feeling we are very far away from Krishna, prayers when our desires are going wild. So, how to approach Krishna prayerfully through the Bhagavad Gita, that's there in this book. So, both these books are available if you would like to have. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. This is 23, 20, both together, 40. 23 and 20, both together. Yeah. Will you be available to sign the book? Or would you say to sign the book?